You're listening to Hot Takes and Sausage. My name is Ryan Snelling. For once, I'm joined by Jaye Williams. Jay, how does it feel to be on Hot Takes and Sausage?
I guess okay. I guess it's good.
I wanted you to ask, what the hell are you talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
I know, but it would have been funnier if you just had no idea what I've been doing in my own little corner on Sight and Sound. Like, yeah, whatever you say, man. I'm on Hot Takes and Sausage.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad that you've been keeping up with your movie episodes. Makes me happy. How's it feel?
It feels good.
Yeah. Do you get stressed out trying to figure things out every week?
No, I just copy what you do on music.
That's good. That's a good thing to do, as long as it gets done.
Just make sure that you text me weekly. Hey, here's what I'm gonna do next week. That way I can stay ahead.
I don't think I've noticed. I don't think I've noticed you doing that at all. If that's an actual thing.
All I have to do is change the title. You'll never suspect it.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you had Ace on. I guess I had RB3 on.
One of my titles was just a line I said within the show, which was more like Jurassic World. Like that's how I'm titling things now.
That's fine.
Yeah. Ace did a good job. He's a good boy, and I know this because I like to hear Ace talk. So I know everyone else likes to hear Ace talk. So the episode did really well, and I think he was excited. I told him, I said, Jay and I, we just want to have these types of conversations with you guys. It means the world to us, and I think he was excited as well. And it might have gone a little bit too long, and I was self-conscious of that. I didn't want to take up a ton of his time. I'm not saying it was long because of him, but overall, it's a great experience, and I think he had fun, and he'll be back.
Yeah, it's nice. I talked to him about maybe coming on a music episode, doing some stuff. The bonus episodes of music where I have people on are fascinating because they're the conversations that I like having with people about music, and but that's not what the show every week is, which is kind of funny because it's just so stressful to try to get somebody. I don't know if people realize that or not. Like, I'm sure people are like, well, why don't they just have people on all the time?
It's kind of annoying.
Yeah, it's really annoying. I mean, Brando witnessed it firsthand. He was like, man, are we ever going to do this? I was like, man, welcome to our world. We have a luxury that we podcast together as much as we do.
Like, I was trying to get Riley on for this episode, but Riley was on the Collider thing, so it would have been pointless. And that's the problem. Like, I had that issue with Film Beef. It's like, hey, I have this movie review podcast, and I'm asking people who also review movies. They're never going to want to be on my show.
Right.
So it came down to, again, here we are, reviewing a movie. I can't go to anyone that I know professionally in this space because they're already doing what I'm asking them to come do here. So...
well, the major difference, though, I mean, is the fact that, and as somebody just from the outside looking in, viewing your show and somebody that listens to it and whatnot, I mean, the best way to do that is not do that, right? Not review the movies and
know,
talk about this,
but
like you did with Ace.
And I never would have done it the way that the Collider did, but at the same time, it's just the fact that I'm trying to be... I'm just aware that he probably doesn't want to have another hour and a half conversation, or maybe he does, and that'd be great. But anyway, you might have guessed by the title of this episode, we are going to review or unreview whatever Jay is labeling this. We're going to discuss a movie post having seen it. Star Wars: The Last Jedi is out right now. Please do not listen to this if you have not seen the movie. We are going to go balls out, spoil the shit out of it. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a handful of things that I personally want to accomplish for myself. Look, I'm already exhausted from all of the content.
Me too.
Like way, way exhausted. I like like I started to watch the Collider review.
Yeah.
And I was watching it when you came in.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't want to watch this review.
I
watched the other stuff that was going on, like the things you might have missed. And
that's the first thing I took in.
Yeah.
Is as soon as I left the theater, right before we went to eat,
I watched it on the car ride home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a full 2 hours, and it flew by though. It flew by. I had a good time with it, but yeah, it was the first thing I took in because I'm still not very confident with how I feel about it. My ideas, my thoughts are still a little bit scrambled, but I have general ideas here, so I can't wait to sort of with our discussion during this episode, I know I'm going to be able to expand and work some things out here, and that's what I love about being able to do this, because so far I've just kind of kept to myself, and I'm also afraid to talk about it with anybody because I don't know.
Right.
Like, people ask me at work, like, "Hey, how was the movie?" And I just said, "Good."
We were whispering at IHOP last night. Listen, the thing about
our waiter looked like Snoke.
The thing about this is that I think is interesting, and just having it be on Sight and Sound. And if this was a weekly episode, I'm sure there would be a review in there somewhere. But I just want to talk about the movie. I just want to talk about and what could be and all this stuff. Because if there was ever anything that could set up like what could happen in the future, which is I think one of the funnest things about fandom.
Yes,
it's this film.
I do want to. Let's go with the fandom thing first, though.
Okay.
Let's talk about why we are exhausted, because it's kind of going to be like in the past, the way that we've had a set segment called First Impressions. We don't need to do that here. We have talked extensively about our thoughts and feelings about Star Wars, and leading up to The Last Jedi, we've had a Last Jedi preview. So let's make this First Impressions bit a bit about our exhaustion. It's only been a little bit more than 24 hours since we first saw the damn thing. We've only seen it once at the time that we are recording this. I am exhausted because there's just been a problem with 2017 in general for me. Like, I'm taking it personally because other people, and this might, okay, maybe it's on me, but I'm going to blame it on other people. They're ruining things for me, Jay. I'm in this
fandom community in general.
I'm in this community, and I'm starting to resent it because I don't like I don't like the way that some of these guys approach things. I like to think that the movie fandom community, I am welcoming of all opinions. I have liked a lot of critiques. My favorite critique so far is from Robert Meyer Burnett. I really loved what he wrote on Facebook about the film. He wasn't easy on it. He made up some really great points, and I enjoyed it. So I'm totally open to smart, interesting criticism, but we're not getting that entirely. And Star Wars fans, particular Star Wars fans, are bothering me and annoying me because they aren't discussing The Last Jedi in the way that I think they would or should any other film. And we'll get more into it. But essentially, I'm just seeing some really bad behavior and a really, really annoying, bratty behavior. And it's more than just not liking something, because it's more than that. It's shittier than that.
Right. Well, it's actually interesting for me because I made that video that's on our YouTube channel right now about why people hate The Last Jedi, and just taking it in from our own Facebook group. Going into it, I thought that the video was going to reinforce what I thought was the temperature of our Facebook group. And most people that I had seen going into the movie were so high on it, they couldn't wait to talk about it and this and that. And naturally so, there's a lot to talk about, whether you think it was an A+ film or if you think it was just a kind of a mediocre film. There's still a lot to talk about. But it was funny when I posted that video, most of the comments are people saying that they didn't enjoy it as much. But one of the things I mentioned when I posted it is I wanted to let people know that I wasn't attacking people that don't like the film or that take issue with the film, or even that have some of the silly criticisms that I think we both share, like this just silly criticisms. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
But I made it known that Sight and Sound is a safe space where I'm never going to get down on anybody for having whatever opinion that they do. I might not necessarily agree with it, and I might try to, you know, rebuke some of the things that they're saying and have a rebuttal. But it is a safe space.
And maybe I shouldn't preface this whole thing as if it's an attack on fandom, because there are other people that I don't agree with, like,
or an attack on negativity towards the movie.
Right, because, and if you want to go straight to the godfather of Star Wars fandom, Christian Harloff, and there's a lot of people, not just him, but he made it a point to say that some of the humor didn't land. I just openly disagree with it.
Right.
Simply because I never found myself bothered with any of the jokes or the placement of humor. There were times where I could absolutely see where someone didn't want humor.
Yeah.
Maybe the back and forth between Kylo and Hux in the Gorilla AT-AT on Crate. Like, there were some interesting, funny lines, and I remember watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and seeing what I thought was supposed to be an epic, serious moment and thinking, no, do not make a joke here.
Right.
I don't want you to do that. And I think that I can see where other people are doing that here, but particularly here, it just didn't bother me. I didn't have a problem with the humor, and not to go right into the review anyway, but I'm just making it a point that I'm fine with disagreeing with some things, and I'm not just going to say that everyone is a moron if they didn't like the movie, no matter how much I want to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's two sides to this whole discussion too, because not only do I think people shouldn't have this militant approach towards people who are taking major issues with the film, but in the same way, people who are taking issue with the film shouldn't go to any sort of extreme of saying like, well, the critics gave it. I saw this sort of language. The critics are only giving it positive reviews because they're afraid of what the fan community is going to say if they don't, which is just complete and utter horseshit. I mean, it's just not the case.
I don't think film critics give a fuck what
absolutely
the common person thinks.
Absolutely not. And I think too, you know whose review I'm super interested in hearing? Andy Greenwald. I legitimately am. I think he's one of the, at least in this aspect of things, he's probably one of the more level-headed. I mean, he can say all he wants about Marvel films, and I get it, why he doesn't enjoy them.
I was surprised that he liked Thor Ragnarok.
Well,
not because I don't think it's a good film. It's just because he can be a little, he can hold his nose up to, is that a thing?
He can turn his nose up to things. Taika Waititi in general, though, is sort of a hipster darling, I think.
Sure.
So I think that plays into it. And listen, this is coming from somebody who owns really nice boots. So
you're currently drinking a LaCroix.
That's right. That's true. I think overall with this movie, and we can just talk about sort of, I guess, our own general reactions, don't you think?
Yeah.
Let's get into it. The thing for me with this film going into it, and the thing that I found fascinating, this is the first Star Wars movie. Well, that's not true. Rogue One was like this, but this is the first saga film that I've ever gone into since probably Phantom Menace, opening weekend. I had all this lead up to it. I just because it's part of our gig with After Schmo to stay in tune with all the stuff going on Collider, and naturally a lot of the stuff going on Collider is Star Wars based. The second the title came on, the music came on, I instantly got chills.
You got emotional?
No, I never get emotional, but
I would argue that getting chills is emotional.
It's a physical reaction or something, but
so is crying.
Tomato. I think the thing that is inescapable from this film, which is I think kind of takes me into my first silly criticism, is that this was in the Star Wars universe. This was definitely a Star Wars film.
You know what's funny? Okay, we're going to need to expand on that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I placed that statement, so hopefully you could unpack it.
Okay. What's interesting about this, and maybe I've never said anything like this before, I really enjoyed The Force Awakens, like quite a bit. I have very few issues with that movie.
It's my second favorite Star Wars film.
It's funny how I'm okay with that. It's funny how this movie it didn't feel like they had to live up to The Force Awakens. Does that make sense? Isn't that interesting?
I thought this
that we
film
both
ran away from The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
to a
and,
certain
and I
extent.
remember, and I said this to you and Luke, and I wasn't even sure what I meant by it yet.
Yeah.
But I said that it made The Force Awakens kind of feel old. Like,
really?
I don't know
Okay.
why, and maybe
I don't remember you saying that, but okay.
yeah, I said that last night. I was like, it kind of makes it. The Force Awakens just kind of feels like an old movie to me. Like and I made this point.
It made it feel like a J.J. Abrams movie for sure.
It made it, yeah. It made it feel like It made it feel like it came out in '77. No, I'm checking.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that was yet, but it did feel like it kind of was distant from it in a way, even though it picks up literally when that movie. I can't figure out how I want to describe it yet, but it's sort of like, okay, I know where to go. I mentioned this in my ride along video that I made with Sturgill in the car, and I made it a point, and again, this was right after we left the theater. I was driving away from the theater, and I said something along the lines that it was interesting how this felt like it still felt like it was the first Star Wars movie.
Okay.
Of this current generation, because I acknowledge, I don't have issue, I acknowledge that Force Awakens served a soft reboot purpose, and that it had a lot to do, and it was mainly about setting up character.
Right.
And it sort of just kind of felt like the pilot, but you don't know what Lost really is until you get into maybe a season finale, or I don't want to spoil the show. It just felt like, it felt like season 1 of Parks and Rec.
No,
it felt like watching
this film did, or
no,
Force Awakens.
Watching this movie made it seem like The Force Awakens is kind of like the first season of The Office, where it was new and you're excited about the potential or whatever, but it really didn't find its footing until this next movie. Not that this found its footing, but it's what I think this represents now where we are with Star Wars.
Well, absolutely.
More so than The Force Awakens does, because The Force Awakens had so much more to think about.
Force Awakens was a thrill ride. It was supposed to introduce new characters and take them on this crazy roller coaster journey,
while also bring Star Wars back to the forefront.
It needed to prove that it can be done.
And so we got that out of the way, in the way that you kind of get a pilot out of the way, and now you're really going to let the season evolve. And I'm comfortable comparing this to television in that way, because it's saga-like. So that's what it felt like to me. It felt like now we are actually going to get what Star Wars looks like under the Disney umbrella.
Yeah.
And I like that about it a lot.
Absolutely.
And I think that, not that people are acknowledging that point per se, but I think that's where so many people are taking issue, because they are now uncomfortable with what Star Wars is and what Star Wars looks like,
right?
Having seen what Rian Johnson just did to everything.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of the characterizations of this film were that it took bold risks, and I think one of the boldest risks that it took, which is probably at its most simple form, is it just established rules, right? I mean, if this film didn't do that, and this was another ride like The Force Awakens was, you could leave that theater saying, yeah, I still know exactly where Star Wars is going, where it's been, all of these things. And for the first time, people had to leave that theater saying, I don't know what's going to happen next, which makes me happy, because
that's where we were 48 hours ago, when we hadn't seen The Last Jedi yet, and we had no idea where it was taking us.
Well, that's where
it's the same feeling.
That's where we were going into The Force Awakens and after The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
People, and it's sort of strange now, having been removed 2 years from it, because I wasn't as ingrained in the community and whatnot as I am now. Looking back on The Force Awakens, I remember thinking to myself at the time, nobody had any idea who these people were. They didn't know who a Rey was. They didn't know who a Finn was. They didn't know who a Phasma was. They didn't know who a Poe was. They didn't know who a Snoke was.
And now they think they know everything about these characters.
Well, and I mean, so it's just sort of strange. Like, you probably spent listen, we've watched a show on Collider where they go through and they will say, I mean, I remember trailer breakdowns. This is clearly this thing and da-da-da. And just looking back on it, it's like, I get it. They're trying to do a job, but it's so based in nothing that how do you do these shows going forward?
I don't know. That's why I've never cared. Not that I've never cared. I like to when I can. I like to theorize and speculate, but I don't try to, and I'm not particularly good at it.
Right.
But it gets to a point where I'm just like, look, I don't want to do that. Like, I know the broad strokes. In general, I want to see Luke use a lightsaber and fight somebody.
Yeah.
But I can't compute, well, it's going to be with DJ because this, and like, I can't back it up with facts and bring in new canon to support that. I'm not good at that. And I think that there are people. Did you watch Scoreboard?
Yes.
And Ken randomly said something like, I have this gut feeling that Leia is just going to become one with the Force somehow. Not die, but I can't explain it.
Yeah.
And he just threw that out of fucking thin air. And then that crazy ass thing with Leia happened with the Force.
Right.
Not that I know it's not technically what he said, but it just felt like he was so.
It was very present in the film, obviously.
No, it felt like he knew.
Right.
That something along those lines would happen, even though that was such a fucking off the wall left field thing to say. And I don't know if I can do that. But it goes back to the point that I've had before when it came to fans just connecting dots from Rey to Kenobi or Luke or whatever. And the reason why I never liked any of that, and the reason I don't think you like Old Republic talk, is because Star Wars fans can only see what we already know.
Yes.
And it really, really bothers me that there are people out there that are criticizing this film for not doing that. Their problem with the film, especially as it relates to the reveal of Rey's parentage, their problem with the film is that the film was always 2 steps ahead of us the entire time.
Yeah.
And they just don't like it. And I feel like that's really bratty. And I think that is something that's particular to Star Wars. And I was trying to wrestle I was trying to wrestle this with you in the living room before. It's like you never use that kind of criticism in any other movie ever, but because it comes to Star Wars, you can apply that. And there might be people that say, look, and I made this point a couple weeks ago, when it comes to comparing Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Star Wars is unlike everything in that it implements comic books, video games. It has canon.
Right.
Whereas MCU doesn't fool with that. MCU has their own way of doing it, and DCU has no way of doing it. So I guess maybe one could argue, look, maybe that's why fans can react to this, particularly with Star Wars, because it's unique in that way. But I'm also bothered because I'm trying to critique a film in the way that I would critique any other film. So I'm not going to bump a letter grade or say this movie sucks because a reveal wasn't what I predicted.
Well, we've been here before with other things. We have. One, it reminds me so much of Lost. One of the things with Lost was there are people out there that do not like. Listen, I can be critical of the ending. I didn't love the ending of Lost, but I also I was fine with the ending of Lost, and there were people who were never going to like the ending of that show because it wasn't exactly what they thought it was going to be. So I think there's something to be said there, but we also saw this exact same thing with Game of Thrones this season. This was the first season of that show that wasn't written by George R.R. Martin, and the fans came out in droves and lambasted a fantastic season, in my opinion, simply on the grounds of the fact that it didn't seem like something that they were familiar with. And it's just like,
yeah.
Were you entertained or were you not?
And if I was going to play devil's advocate a little bit and play on their side, I think that there definitely is a responsibility from these filmmakers to give us the best quality product that they can. We need them. We expect them to stay true to the material and give us Star Wars. And I think Rian Johnson, you've heard Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams both say that it was critical on both of their pre-production meetings that they were talking to Kathleen Kennedy about what is Star Wars.
Right.
And I don't think they ever departed from that. Some people do. I don't. I feel like we've gotten 2 Star Wars movies with this trilogy. But what my point is that I don't expect or want any studio head to give me crap. I expect better. I expect the best quality product because I do think that they have that responsibility.
Yeah, I mean,
But
that's the bare minimum, right? The bare minimum is to make a good film. It's not like he was just going to come out and be like, you know who wasn't trying to make a Star Wars movie or a Star Wars movie was the brothers or those 2 guys that were making Solo. What are those guys' names?
Lord and Miller.
Yeah,
they're not brothers. They're
Okay.
they have 2 different last names.
that's right. There's a lot of the Duffer brothers. So yeah, I mean, that's an example where it's just like they were trying to make a different movie under the guise of Star Wars.
Right.
And
they were trying to make a Family Guy episode.
Exactly. And, does that seem interesting to me? Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it would be funny to see it. But then it gets into a whole conversation as like this, would Solo even, is it even worth it to rank it amongst the rest of the Star Wars films? I have no problem doing that with this one. Like, it's just like,
Well, see, this is where the lines start to blur.
right.
Because then it kind of gets into, what we say we appreciate about the MCU is that they all still feel like a Marvel film, even though some of them differ majorly when it comes to tone and what we can expect from that.
I mean, I think they all have beats within one another, and you could see how
it's more so about tone and genre. I mean, there are different genres within the MCU, but there's still that blanket genre of superhero film or Marvel film, whatever you want to say.
For sure. I mean, but for the most part, a lot of those films are so spread out from one another that they seem like they're operating in different worlds.
I think that it's fair to say that Rogue One handled that. Rogue One is a Star Wars movie, whether it has its own risks or has its own tone or what have you. It's sort of the outside the box way of doing it. It still felt like Star Wars, at least.
What's funny now is to look back at Rogue One after having seen the reactions from The Last Jedi, because again, Rogue One took place at a time where fans could be comfortable. Oh yeah, we know this. Right before A New Hope.
Yep.
Sometime after the prequels.
Another Death Star, back-to-back Death Star movies.
Yeah.
Force Awakens, Rogue
For sure.
One.
Darth Vader, characters, I mean, it's just, I get, it's that comfort level where you can go to bed at night. Yes, this is the Star Wars that I know.
Right.
And there's a big difference between the Star Wars you know and just, is it Star Wars or not?
It's just, we got to get out of this mindset. We have to get out of the mindset that we think not that we think we know what Star Wars is. I think people know what Star Wars is, but I think there's also what it has a potential to be, or it's just like,
I think you can be in that mindset. You can be in the mindset. You just have to know how to utilize it, because if you are in that mindset and it's legitimately making you not enjoy the films to the fact where you're parading around telling people that it's terrible, that's where I have issues.
But it's being non-accepting of new things, because what was new about Rogue One other than characters?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean,
and point of view. But I mean, it's interwoven even with Rebels. I mean, it's interwoven, happens directly tied into what is happening with Rebels. So much, in fact, that the ghost ship was in fucking Rogue One. It's like, it's literally like the same story is happening on television and in the movies right now. Or not literally parallel, because one came a year later, but it's...
it's a natural reaction to feel uncomfortable with stuff like that. I mean, change is difficult, especially if it's something like I get it. I made that whole illustration to you over the weekend about, what if somebody just came around and just proved that the Bible was incorrect? Like, that'd be hard for people. The thing that they built their lives around is no longer valid.
Change should be desired, because I spoke about it before. We talked about it, how I almost would have thrown in the towel had we had another Death Star.
Well, allegedly it was by Star Wars fans, right? I mean, when J.J. Abrams was announced to direct Episode 9, people came out in droves because they said that it's the safe pick. They want Rian Johnson as director because they want a director who can take things in another direction. Now that we've done that, it seems like they're backpedaling and saying...
Are you talking about Force Awakens or Episode 9?
Episode 9.
Yeah, I thought you said Force Awakens, which I think your point still applies. I don't think everyone was on board with JJ doing Force Awakens.
I think they were looking at that announcement, and they're looking at Force Awakens, saying that Force Awakens still felt like... We watched a review before we're coming on air. A guy basically saying that Rogue One took too many chances. It was too outside of the comfort zone, but then categorized The Force Awakens as being too safe. It's like, where is the middle ground here?
Right.
Like, do you want this to be like, do you want them to film like a Mad Max style movie, but as long as all the rules are the same? Like they're, right. I mean, it's just because ultimately what this movie did is I think if we go outside of the big picture stuff about just like what we know and what we don't know, the movie, it's not like it introduced this major change. Like they didn't announce that Jedi could turn into dogs or something like that.
Right.
You know?
No, I don't think, well, that's part of the problem.
Right.
And the reason why I'm annoyed is because none of it felt...
You would rather them be able to turn into dogs.
None of it felt radical. It all felt within, and I'm not calling the film safe. It felt like it lived within the bounds of reason in this universe. It felt like, again, going back to my point, not only did it feel like we finally we're digging in deep to what Star Wars is nowadays, it felt like Star Wars the whole way through. Even for me, and this is where we might differ a little bit, it's because I do think that one of the weaker part of the films was the Canto Bight portion.
I think we agree on that.
But it was totally fine for me. And I know that people are juggling like it was a departure from everything else, and it didn't feel like Star Wars. It felt like other things. And it's like, yeah, maybe. But it was also pretty much an episode of Star Wars Rebels.
Right.
And it also felt like something that could have happened in the prequels, which is something that I've been calling for, because I don't think it's necessarily right for this new trilogy to only look like, if you want to really stay true to canon, you can't ignore some of the visual aesthetics of the prequels and what they acknowledged. You can bridge them both together and implement them into this new trilogy. I feel like your computer's lagging.
Yeah, it looks weird.
And I'm not saying you need to include the 50s diner that's in Attack of the Clones, but...
Well, the thing that you're saying and you're picking up on here, I actually haven't heard anybody criticize specifically what you're saying. I don't think, at least from what I've seen, I don't think people are saying that Canto Bight doesn't feel like Star Wars. And my criticism, I think... Look, if they wanted to do a Canto Bight movie, yeah, sure. It's fine.
They've got a book out of some kind, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a place that can exist in Star Wars. It's just my issue with it is this whole set of circumstances, the journey we went on here, and especially going there to this place in the Star Wars universe, just didn't belong in this film specifically.
And I mean, we can discuss the things that... Look, like I said, you can take it as you will. Maybe someone hearing me say, "Oh, well, that is kind of a Rebels episode." Well, then you could argue, "Yeah, I don't want a Rebels episode in the movie that I've been waiting for 2 years." Then episode 8, I want Rebels to be on Rebels, and I get it. I just think like if you want to throw out, it didn't feel like Star Wars, or if I just didn't think it was that big of a deal. Yes, if you asked me what's your least favorite part of the movie, Canto Bight. What's your least favorite storyline? Finn and Rose.
Right.
But overall, I still enjoyed them. And they were part of the machine that became a movie that I really loved.
Yeah.
So I hate that. I guess what I'll say is I hate that they think that that's such a huge burden on the film that I wish that they could kind of let it live a little bit more. Maybe felt a little bit better about it.
Well, it's not the first time that's really occurred in a Star Wars film either. I think that's one of my biggest issues with Return of the Jedi is that as soon as Luke leaves Endor and it's just Han and Leia hanging out with Ewoks, I don't give a fuck about that. And then and actually I legitimately think, this is just my personal take, but the Dagobah scenes in Empire are fascinating and interesting because Yoda is such a great character then. But then Dagobah in Return of the Jedi, especially following a very, very big and long scene at Jabba's palace and all that stuff.
40 minutes, that Tatooine.
I mean, you want to talk about coming to a halt. This very somber, and it's a special moment, the somber moment where Yoda passes away and all this stuff. It's just like, again, pacing issues are not devoid of Star Wars stuff. Part of the biggest thing, I think, with all of this, or with this criticism, mainly comes down to the quality of writing and the things that we loved about the movie, and just the things we were kind of lukewarm on, no pun intended. I thought everything that took place on the island was so fascinating. And then I also thought the stuff going on the ship with the Resistance was very interesting, maybe not as fascinating as the mythology deep dive we were getting on the island. But then you take another step outside of that, and it's just like, are these the steps throughout the whole movie? It becomes a little bit tedious. Island high, okay, going off to the ship, going to Canto Bight. It's just like, ugh.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting, and one of the points that Robert Meyer Burnett made about that was the whole chase, which I liked because it was a ticking time bomb. I just thought it was really
right.
It was a really big way to contain the story.
It was like speed in
that's
space.
That's all it was.
Like speed with Keanu Reeves.
And it was slow moving, right? But I also
it looks slow, but they're probably barreling through space at a ridiculous speed.
Yeah, definitely. And so, but what would have been way more interesting is that if they knew that they were headed to Crate all along. If the whole point was like, we have to get to Crate, because you had the idea, well, they just stumbled upon Crate that had that one rebel base. It's like, why they could have just always been on course for Crate.
Well, I think they were. We just weren't privy to that knowledge.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
maybe that's a detail. I might need to read it.
I think if I'm remembering it correctly, Laura Dern's character was privy of this place that Leia had been, and this was sort of the plan all along. But if they could have just informed other people,
right? Okay, that's right. Maybe I don't know why I just let him say that. No, I'm joking.
It's okay.
But yeah, I really like that idea anyway. But if you want to, let's go back.
What was Robert Meyer Burnett's criticism?
He was
elaborate.
He was just looking about how he would have, because he used to read a lot of screenplays,
right? And
he was just kind of talking about doctoring the script a little bit, adding those ticking time bombs, and he also mentioned like why you should have had Rose and Finn on that mission the entire time to begin with. That way it doesn't feel like you're extracting from the rest of the movie. You could have just been following along, and maybe they would have joined back in earlier or something like that, which I could go either way on. But I just thought he had some really interesting points, and I liked how he just presented, like, he wasn't just being bratty about the film. He was actually kind of saying what he would change about it, and I just thought it was interesting, and one of my favorite people to criticize the movie so far. But like I said, that storyline, I think, also sort of birthed a lot of things that people didn't like. I wish we got more from Justin Theroux. What the hell? If I had, you're making that face. You went to go pee. You didn't even get to see him.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm making the face because just put him in another movie. Give him a better character.
His character is probably going to be in a book. I could see him being a book character now.
Yeah, for sure.
Or maybe he was, because they do have a Canto Bight book already. Maybe he is the guy. But anyway, and I think a lot of people don't know how they feel, or maybe just blatantly dislike, or think that DJ Benicio's character is just the least.
He's my least favorite part of the movie.
Favorite part of the movie.
I thought his acting was very rough in the film. I thought his interpretation of the character was very over the top. And I'm just not looking for
what I'll say against that, though? Not that I'm total disagreement of you, because I'm not. But I think it's interesting because I think I know where the mindset was here.
Yeah.
Think about how few times individuals with stutters are represented on the big screen. And if they were going to be represented in any place, I like the fact that it happened for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Inside Star Wars. So I do not have a problem with that character choice.
Yeah.
I didn't really think anything of his acting, so you can take that either way. No, I wasn't majorly impressed, but I didn't think he was by any means bad.
It was his eccentricities. I mean, I thought he was more closely resembled Jack Sparrow or Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor than he did any character that I would ever want to see in Star Wars. So that was a little bit of a bummer. The thing, I mean, we haven't really talked about the island at all.
Well, it also sucks, and if we're not going to stay here, so I figured I'd just go on, throw out all my Canto Bight Benicio stuff. The other problem is, like, you just kind of wanted Benicio to have a bigger role when you find out, like, Justin Theroux could have played that guy.
He's arguably one of the biggest star actors that Star Wars has ever had. I mean, is that a fair statement? At least.
Yeah,
I mean, because a lot of these people in the Star Wars universe were groomed.
He's up there with like Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I just think that what his character ended up being, because now people are going to try to nail me with the hypocrisies. He wasn't what you wanted him to be. No, I just think measured up to everything else going on, he was my least favorite part. I don't particularly dislike it. He was just my least favorite. The part that I was invested in the least. But I mean, I like the idea that he wasn't Ezra, because I think that would have been just that would have rewarded so few people. So it's not something that we needed.
Yeah, I think going to the island, one of the most, and I think the thing that made this movie so special, because everything, well, the Canto Bight stuff, in my opinion, is a fundamental filmmaking flaw. Like I think it's an issue where you're doing these things and they just shouldn't have happened in the storyline that we're getting. But regardless, the stuff on the island is so enriching because, in my opinion, we've never had anything like this in Star Wars, in the sense where, for the first time in a Star Wars film, without me having to go read books or venture out into canon outside the film, I felt like this movie had a history to it and a richness to it that I wasn't just told about. It felt like it existed and it needed to be explored further. And the only other, well, that's not true, that one of the franchises that does this the best is Harry Potter. I've only read one Harry Potter book, but I know through a movie that does very interesting character development, makes you focus on iconic characters throughout the entire film, another character in every single one of those movies is the backstory, is the history that they're not touching on. You just know it's there, and you can feel it. And that's what that island did. For the first time, it gave tangible evidence in a film that there is history to the Jedi beyond. I mean, the prequels, I think, did some of that.
Well, I think I know more about the Force and about the ways of the Jedi from this movie than ever before. Because,
or at least the philosophies.
It was just, I feel like even when, and you saw Empire more recently than I have, I think, but like even when it's just Yoda and Luke, it's just kind of like, use your mind, focus, concentrate. And it's like, okay, then he knows how to use the Force. But it's like, it didn't have all the context. And maybe you could argue, okay, that's when you got the prequels. But it's like, even then, it's just like, okay, they're not allowed to get married. They can't use their emotions. And it's like, but
it's those human characteristics inside of all of that makes it interesting too. So throughout these entire scenes, we're getting a constant philosophical debate within Luke Skywalker.
Right.
Not saying that Force users should end. There will always be Force users. And Kylo Ren, which is so fascinating, mirrors his point of view. There doesn't have to be Jedi. There doesn't have to be Sith. There can just be Force users. He even goes through basically calling out the Jedi, like, we are the ones that set this in motion.
And it's interesting because Yoda also falls in line with that. Like, you have this character and he's basically calling out like, yeah, what I lived through during the Clone Wars and the prequel era was just nothing. Like, we shouldn't have taken ourselves so seriously. I should have let Anakin marry Padme in peace.
Well, his quote to Luke actually was just as much about him in the past of the Jedi, that sometimes the best lesson to learn is through failure.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's fascinating. And I think it's actually beneficial for Rey to have left the island with all of that knowledge, but still take those Jedi texts to come to her own conclusion rather than be indoctrinated by Luke by saying, yeah, I'm done with all this.
Right.
But also to leave saying, I have that knowledge, but I also have this history here to formulate the best of both worlds, perhaps, maybe. Kylo Ren in this movie and his motives are fascinating to me, because at the end of the day, power and wanting to be the man in charge and the person on top won over, I think, was what he was driven by.
Well, you see yourself in the character as well.
I do. I mean, I don't care. I can go off on my own and do my thing, and you
kill
can do
the
your
past.
Thing. Yeah. Kill the past. No, I believe in that. I believe in Kylo Ren's principles.
I know. That's what I said.
Here's the fascinating thing about Kylo Ren in this movie for me. I think Adam Driver is a fucking G. I think he's amazing.
He really won me over. And I liked what he did. I mean, I thought Kylo Ren was an impeccable villain, but I didn't see something particular that Adam Driver was bringing to the role. I mean, I thought his voice was cool, especially when he has the mask on. I really like that. But it's like, I didn't really have an opinion on Adam Driver in general, so I was just kind of in a place where it could have been anybody except Paul Dano.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me.
And
that's fascinating to me just because his emotion in The Force Awakens.
I mean, he's good. Don't get me wrong, but I was just thinking about like what made JJ go, yeah, this is the guy.
Well, what I was getting to is I actually think JJ captured Kylo Ren much better than Rian Johnson did. I felt that Kylo Ren coming out of The Force Awakens, even beyond him wearing the mask more throughout that film, I thought he was more menacing. I thought he just was overall more memorable under JJ.
I think that he's still conflicted very much.
Right.
When you go back to that moment where he thinks about killing Leia and then backs off, yet is trying to prove himself to Snoke at the same time, but not if it means killing his mother. So he's still very conflicted. He's still a nutcase. He's still crazy. And I just think that what this movie was, it was an expansion of the character. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I want to say which one do I think captured Kylo Ren better. It just felt like sort of a natural expansion and development of the character. And I always thought it was him, but this was definitely the time when I realized, I'm a movie behind now, where I realized that he's perfect, and he was awesome as Kylo in this movie.
When I say capture, I don't even mean the performance specifically. I mean actually visually. I think visually, Kylo Ren
I get it.
Under JJ was more interesting. I remember him walking through the forest, like even in his lightsaber battle in the snow on Starkiller Base, I thought was more riveting and again menacing. Just just small details like angles he shot from, just being slightly tilted, which is a very JJ thing to do, just being off balance and whatnot, which represents his mindset. But I think here's an interesting thing to think about. What do you think Kylo Ren's reaction would have been in that last crate battle? I'm sure we'll talk about it in just a second, but what do you think his reaction would have been if it was Rey that walked out to face him as opposed to Luke? Because first of all, here's something that I'm just now thinking about and remembering. We never visually saw how Rey left that room. It cut away, and then it cut back, and he was laying on the ground for no reason at all, other than they pulled apart the lightsaber and it flashed.
Right.
In my mind, when that happened, I thought that he had told her to go. get out of here, escape?
I don't know. I didn't pick up on that. I'm not
I haven't
sure
heard
right
anybody
now.
talk about it.
I'm not sure about that right now. But as far as answering your first question, I think it would have been somewhat similar to how it was at the end of Force Awakens, only because, I mean, Kylo at the end of Force Awakens, Kylo never wanted to kill Rey.
Right.
He told her, he offered his hand, saying, "I could show you the ways of the Force," at the end of the Force Awakens. And I don't know. I mean, I think there still would have been a ton of conflict there. And I think at that point, maybe Rey, well, it's hard to say. I think it would have been harder on both of them without a doubt.
We don't have any resolve on their relationship
it's
with
like-
one another.
But think about it, though. Rey came up from a place where she was totally angry that he had just murdered Han Solo, who she had just been hanging out with. Han Solo was responsible for getting her off Jakku. So, but the entire movie plays on the fact that there's a much higher level of understanding between the two characters. Not that they are in agreement with one another,
Right.
but there's an understanding there. So I think it just would have made for...
They can relate to one another.
Yeah, it would have made for... it would have been a different type of fight, but I think it actually would have been a fight. Whereas
Yeah, okay.
him versus Luke wasn't so much a lightsaber battle, if you will. It was just kind of an epic one-on-one standoff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if a fight would have happened, but it's just such an interesting concept to think about. That so in Snoke's throne room, when they're using the Force, they're doing like the Force tug of war over the lightsaber, and it breaks apart, and she walks away. It's fascinating to me that the next time we see her after it breaks, is then on the Millennium Falcon, flying into Crate to help save the day. That's a really big jump. That's a huge jump, and
Yeah,
that makes me wonder if that's something that was left on the cutting room floor.
maybe.
But yeah, it's just very interesting to me, that whole set of circumstances. At first, when it happened too, I thought to myself, maybe they did come to some sort of conclusion and that he is good and that he's trying to take hold of the First Order, but then they attacked people, and I was like, well, that's not the case.
When that Luke stuff was unfolding on Crate, like when he takes his hood off when he's talking to Leia, and
Yeah.
you can see that his beard is brown and his hair is cut, and when he survives all of those blasts.
Right.
Did you know what was
Fantastic
happening?
writing. No, I didn't pick up on it until much
I-
later.
It was a weird. It was like, even though I didn't have an explanation.
Well, we even questioned it afterwards. We were like, why was his lightsaber blue? Like, we
Yeah.
still were like trying to put
Right.
the pieces together.
Yeah. And I don't know, like at the time that was happening, my mind was so blown. I thought that it was just me, again, kind of giving myself to maybe there are some new rules with the Force, or I just kind of thought maybe in the way that there's like a force field around the rebel ship, I
Mhm.
just figured maybe he was like enveloped in some kind of shield, and that he was literally just getting hit like from an inch within his face over and over again.
We're talking about the blast thing. Yeah, I was thinking he was so,
When he was- yeah.
so powerful, he was able to like
Yeah. But it was so close on his being, I figured it had to be like right up on him, and he
Right.
just kind of enveloped himself in something.
Well, we
But-
saw some. I mean, in the Force Awakens, we saw something that we had never seen before when Kylo Ren stopped a blast in midair. We've never
Yeah.
seen that before, and he held it there for a long
and
time.
even the him meddling within her mind and seeing
Yeah.
the island. And I at first, when we were trying to figure out what was going on with the as Christian would call it, the Skype call between
Right.
the Force Skype between Kylo and Rey, I thought part of that was due to his maybe a connection that he made
Right.
previously when he was sort of digging through her mind.
Then he'd have to
um,
have something like that with Poe as well, right?
True,
Yeah.
but I just figured
But-
the movie wasn't doing that because what are you going to do with Kylo and
Right.
Poe?
Also, because Poe's not Force sensitive that we know of.
Correct.
No, it's fascinating. The new rules are all very interesting. Again, just while we're here, going back to the island, I love the exploration. Again, of the philosophy that we've talked about already so much. The I almost call it the Canto Bight scene. The scene on Crate, that entire battle, I thought was really cool.
Loved it.
It literally backs up against the wall. I also love the final scene of Rey lifting those rocks, because in that moment, something happened that I had never thought about before, was that she was revealing to these people for the first time that she is force sensitive. Because she obviously went to that island to meet Luke Skywalker and all this stuff. It was a symbol of hope.
It's the first time that she is using her powers in front of people.
Blatantly.
But when Han and Finn rescue her in Starkiller Base, they hug and she goes, I don't know what happened. Well, she doesn't know at that point.
Right.
But she lets Finn on to the fact that something happened.
Finn's aware, but
yeah.
But she's not, and just in general, it was a sign of hope. It was definitely a sign of hope when they saw her and whatnot.
Right. I did hate, though. It kind of felt like Rey's storyline was so top heavy, and maybe that's not even fair because they did have that incredible team up sequence, which was one of my favorite things in Star Wars ever. Maybe.
I agree.
Maybe I just wish she was able to contribute more on Crate, because even within the scene, she swoops in by the Millennium Falcon, and then a ton of stuff happens before we see her again, and she spots the crystal foxes.
Right.
So that was a little kind of
band name called it
off balance,
yeah.
But yeah, what a great moment for her though, and Daisy Ridley,
great.
Her and Gal Gadot.
You like that?
I mean, my goodness, they are incredible.
Pleasant. You like that?
They are just great, and she was fantastic in the role, and I loved her relationship with Luke.
I was about to say the chemistry between them. I mean, listen, if I'm being completely honest about it, I don't think I don't think Mark Hamill's acting as Luke Skywalker has ever been all that great. I just thought it's been fine. It's been that is Luke Skywalker. I get that.
Yeah.
This was great acting.
Yes.
He was fantastic in this role, and did I feel his passion like coming back throughout the entire film. And their connection, their chemistry was just unbelievable.
Yeah. I think that everybody did great. I loved how much more we got of Poe Dameron, because we kind of talked about how ultimately he's sort of a nothing main character in Force Awakens. An
argument can be made that as much time was spent with Poe as there was with Rey, and in fact, he ended up becoming the Finn of this film, not because obviously of his relationship with Rey, but just he was the supporting role.
Well, they're kind of setting him up to lead the Resistance now.
100%.
So I think that that's great. I think that's really awesome. I mean, I liked what they did with Finn. I've gone on record to say I believe Finn is the best character in The Force Awakens. He was probably the least served, but I also really, really liked Rose. And I liked how Kayla talked about really enjoying Rose's sister.
Right.
And Rose's sister, I don't even remember her name. I know Kayla does.
Yeah.
But that's just a very strong moment in Star Wars in general, when Rose's sister is trying to get the detonator. It was great.
It was a Rogue One moment. It was the most Rogue One moment in this movie.
And it was one of my most favorite shot things of the entire movie.
Yeah.
How he did that. And I thought that was really great, really powerful. You're absolutely right, because it kind of shows how gray, more interesting these kind of people can be. I mean, that was literally a suicide.
Yeah.
Right. So that was really great. And I loved Rose. I thought Kelly Marie Tran was great, and I just want to see more from that character. I really enjoyed her. And when it comes to Canto Bight, and I know we're going back to that, but I really appreciated it. Not only did it do something different while also feeling reminiscent of other things in Star Wars, but I liked the fact that their presence there planted a seed, and how the movie came full circle and ended on the kid using the broom and feeling inspired.
Right.
That kid had as many Luke looking at the two suns moment, seeing that shining star and having that resistance symbol with him. I thought that was really great. It reminded me of um, what he did with Looper.
Yeah.
And how great of a moment I think it is where the movie just freezes and Joseph Gordon-Levitt realizes that he's about to cause what happened to him as a child.
Right.
And he has this moment and this moment only it just came down to a moment, if you will. And that moment meant that everything else could be right in the world. And that's sort of what this reminded me of, that Finn and Rose probably didn't think anything of it, but they left the largest impression on these children's lives. And I thought that was a really interesting angle to play. And I thought that was so much a Rian Johnson thing in this movie. But so I think there's still a lot to appreciate there, even though it might be one of the least favorite things in the movie. And I do wish that we got a little bit more from Finn. I think that I was still a little bit hungry after the Finn and Phasma fight. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. I was only expecting more because there was so much stuff that had to come out about Phasma. I thought she was going to be utilized in the movie more, but I'm wondering, there's got to be, like, general audiences are probably like, where did she come from? Like, because only we know that she survived in the comics.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think from a general audience point of view that this movie could potentially be a little bit more difficult to digest, simply because it is a little bit, and this isn't a negative, but it's a little bit slower paced than The Force Awakens, specifically because it's a different type of film. Force Awakens is more digestible because it's just a more fun ride.
Well, I'm going to give the audience a little bit more credit, though, because I think that they've experienced this before, from how big a difference it is between A New Hope and Empire. And I'm not.
You're talking. I mean, you're talking a long time.
I'm talking about mainly about scope and pacing and things like that.
Yeah,
character development, things like that.
I mean, even kids. Like, so.
Yeah.
Think about a kid, a parent that took their kid that was 7. To see The Force Awakens at 9. I mean, it's going to be a little bit tough just to see them hanging out on an island for a while, talking to, like giant Ninja Turtle nuns.
I kind of thought that part was a little bit awkwardly paced.
What's that?
Because I don't know the Rey and Luke stuff at the beginning, like before he decides to train her, and she's just kind of following him while he's fishing and stuff. Like, I didn't know how many days that was, and it was weird that after all that time had passed, he didn't ask what her name was until the very end. So I was just kind of unaware of time and space in that montage, but ultimately it didn't really.
Sort of reminded me of Rocky and Creed in the movie Creed. How he's just constantly like following him around, like, hey, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Sort of interesting because I just watched that movie not that long ago. But so many things in this film that I think is funny to look back on. From The Force Awakens, like, I fully expected we got a flashback to Kylo maybe not necessarily taking out the Jedi Temple, but we saw a flashback from that time, which I was, you don't get a lot of flashbacks in Star
Wars. Never gotten flashbacks until now, with the exception of the Force back that Rey had in Force Awakens,
which I was kind of surprised they even did the flashback like that, because I thought that they were just going to use like a holocron or something like that to sort of showcase whatever, but that wasn't the case.
It's just a matter of editing.
Yeah, I thought for sure that we were going to get to see that moment sort of unfold. Simply because we actually got to see the moment when Luke puts his hand. Well, I guess ultimately it makes you think, or it makes you realize that vision she saw wasn't shot for shot things going on, because we also, somebody else pointed this out, I can't take credit for it, but the shot of the Knights of Ren with Kylo Ren, we now know that because from the story that was told, Kylo woke up after that event, and that's when he did the turn. But I'm sure he wasn't carrying around the Kylo Ren mask and all that stuff at that point.
And I think that even the stuff that was I'm still unaware of Snoke's influence on him at that point. Like, how long had he already been in contact with Snoke? Because he had gotten to the point where he was just like, all right, I'm leaving. Hey, Snoke, what's up?
Let's put a pin in this for the simple fact that we probably should, give our final grade on the movie and stuff like that. But we'll do some speculation talk and whatnot at the end if you want to.
Okay. The last thing I kind of want to say here that I really enjoyed, the performances were fantastic. I think there wasn't anything that ultimately ruined my time in the theater. But I'm still unpacking a lot of this. I will see it. I'm definitely seeing it on Christmas Day, but I might go see it again before that. But definitely after that, I could see myself seeing it 3 or 4 times in the theaters. I thought the way that they handled our seniors, I thought they handled them beautifully. Leia had that crazy earth-shattering moment that blew everyone's minds. Luke told us that he literally, like, his hands went straight to his face when he saw Leia do that.
Some people not on board with that.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with it. That's one of those things that people are just freaking out, and I don't really know why.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a little corny. If I'm being honest,
I thought it was interesting.
I thought the scene was very bold. I think how it was shot with the explosion, and they killed poor Akbar and kind of threw him to the side, and her floating in space. I think I just think that it was kind of like, all right, what are we doing here? I remember seeing it when it happened. I was kind of like, ugh. There was a few times I was like, ugh, throughout the movie. There were a few there were a few poor green screen shots too. Like there was one on Crate when they showed Luke and Kylo. Well, they showed Kylo with the walkers behind him that I was kind of like, ugh, I don't know if I think this looks good, but technical flaws aside.
It's a wrap. The other thing that I really enjoyed about I liked how the seniors were handled, and Luke and Leia had a really great moment together.
Yes.
The other thing I thought was really interesting is that this reminded me of some of the things that I loved about Harry Potter, which is that Harry Potter is so interesting and fascinating to me for so many different reasons. But I love how there's so much rich mythology when it comes to, and you can argue that Star Wars has sort of always had this,
Right.
but at least it's present here now in this trilogy, especially, like, even more so. Like, okay, in Force Awakens, Luke was a myth, and we didn't really know how it played into where Rey was. But now it's like the adults are really how they have lived their lives is really affecting our heroes, and the fact that we got this expanding mythology and seeing, like, it reminded me of seeing Kylo and Luke's. It felt like it was like a Dumbledore and a Snape flashback from was it Half-Blood Prince or whatever, where they do all that. So it just kind of reminded me of those kind of moments, the things that I really liked about that. And I was very moved from Luke's death. I thought it was really, really great. Poopy Yoda was a nice surprise. It's funny how you have those moments. Like, for me personally, going into that movie, it's hard for me to believe, like, yeah, they'll bring Yoda back. For whatever reason, it's hard for me still to realize that Star Wars is going on in my lifetime. So, of course, they can fucking bring in Yoda whenever they want. But for whatever reason, I always have this.
But to be fair with that whole thing, and I'm actually on board with you here, because I remember that's one of those things when, like, I remember they were speculating, could they have a Force Ghost Yoda? Could they have a Force Ghost Obi-Wan and use Ewan McGregor? Could they have a Force Ghost Anakin and bring back Hayden Christensen? And through all those, I'm like, no, they're never going to do that. And then when it happened, I literally turned to Kayla and I said, out of all the things that happened in the movie, the only time I had a vocal reaction was when you saw his little ear from the back. I said, "Oh shit!" I was just like, "Oh my god!" Because I cannot believe they're doing
even
this
though
right now.
know you're watching a Star Wars movie, you're literally watching a movie where Luke Skywalker is walking around
in 2017.
Yes, but for whatever reason, Yoda pops up on the screen, and your instinct is, I guess they can do that. I guess I do live in this reality where that can still happen.
Part of it is too, and if I'm being honest about it, part of it is because JJ is a very modern filmmaker. In fact, there may not be a better example of a modern type of filmmaker, and just the way he makes blockbuster tentpole movies. He makes them very well. I feel like, even knew to a certain extent, like, yeah, we can have all these, live action animatronics and puppets and stuff like that and sell it. But you know what? We can't do Force Ghost because it's a little too retro. But it's like he wouldn't touch that.
Imagine seeing a Force Ghost in Force Awakens. For whatever reason, it feels like it doesn't fit. Like, where would it go? Like, what would it look like? But it's so strange how we have that, even though we're totally wrong. But
I want to tag on to Force Ghost stuff and
I don't get why
speculation stuff.
Whatever. I don't get why Yoda has to look different every time they do it.
That was the only other moment where, when he turned around and I saw his face, I said, "Oh no!" Because at first I said, "Oh shit," and then I said, "Oh no."
It's because you just don't expect him to look. And I'm not even talking about puppetry versus CGI here.
Right.
I'm talking about design.
We're talking about like IMAX cameras shooting this character.
I had the same reaction. I remember seeing Star Wars for the first time in the late 90s as a kid, leading up to the puppet Yoda in Phantom Menace. Because now we don't have puppet Yoda. They've since gone back and he's CGI Yoda. But there was a puppet in Phantom Menace. And puppet Yoda in Phantom Menace
looked like shit.
Was a completely different design than puppet Yoda from Empire and Jedi.
Just keep it the same.
It's like, I understand.
You can make the lightsabers the same throughout all the movies.
I was like, I understand maybe not having that puppet around, like, it got wet in the rain or something like that. But just use the same design. Like, why did you have to have? I think I've seen George Lucas in those documentaries, like, contemplate the design of Yoda. It's like, you already have that. So it's just weird that they go through it every time.
Yeah.
Even CGI Yoda looks totally different than Phantom Menace puppet Yoda and Empire Strikes Back Yoda.
Right.
It's just a completely different design.
Yeah.
Anyway. I love that Yoda was in this movie.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was great to see. I think it's safe to say that they probably had some interactions because Yoda was sort of having the same mindset as Luke. And of course, I mean, I think it would be safe to say that through the 30-year journey that Luke Skywalker's been on, his Force Ghost pals have they've been experiencing these same sort of philosophical understandings that he's gone through. You know, he had the whole thing of have you read the Jedi text? A page turner, they're not. And it's just like, it's just that sort of humor.
It's clever.
I mean, it's sort of hearkening back more to original trilogy Yoda as opposed to douchey, not gonna do shit Yoda from hateable Yoda in the prequels.
I think there's one more thing we have to talk about because we haven't really talked about it at all. Snoke.
Oh yeah, he's in this movie.
And I've been working on my Snoke impression.
I don't want to hear it. I've heard it already, and it's going to be our audience is going to
General.
Yep, that was it. That was the cringe I was waiting for. It's all good.
Raw.
How do you feel about the fact that he died? I mean, listen, this
symbolizes everything that we talked about at the beginning of this podcast.
I've got issues with it.
Being safe. And by safe, I think a lot of people go, if you're being safe now, you're being reminiscent of previous Star Wars films.
Right.
This is everything that we were just talking about. So the safe way to do Snoke would have been to keep him alive for the third movie to mirror exactly what they did with the Emperor in the original trilogy. So what they did was kill him here. It was really, really cool. Led to one of the greatest fight scenes that I think in Star Wars history. So my complaint, I like the fact that they killed him, even though that's not what I expected. Even in my prediction thing, I thought there's no way Snoke couldn't be in the last movie.
Yeah,
I was wrong.
I'm totally fine with him.
But I do get why people, and this is something I do understand with the criticism, is I do want more I wanted more from the character before that happened.
Right.
Not that he wasn't great. Looked fantastic. Andy Serkis kills it in this role.
I thought he was incredible.
I like Snoke so much.
Yeah.
I liked him so much. I wanted more from him. I would have loved to have him in the next movie, but I thought ultimately he got a really great moment. But I just wish I still knew him more. And obviously, I think a Snoke novel or comic is inevitable.
Well, that's one of the things I said in my video is that if to have an issue with Snoke dying but being invested in him, it's not really an issue, because just because he died in the second film doesn't necessarily mean he was quote unquote nobody. I mean, he still has a history. Like, we're all aware of this history. Unfortunately, the movie itself didn't serve that because it didn't flesh him out in the films, which goes into a million other things that they haven't fleshed out in the films.
And you could also argue that maybe you could possibly blame that on JJ. Maybe.
To a certain extent.
I don't subscribe to that, but
to a certain extent. I mean, my biggest issue with it is I feel like there might be like kind of a mild plot hole because of the fact that I think we can all sort of agree that Snoke is probably very powerful with the Force. I mean, we saw him as a hologram be able to utilize the Force from afar.
He appeared to be the strongest with the Force that I've ever seen.
And I think part of my issue was his inability to see what was going on there with Kylo.
Well, I mean,
there's a theory that's floating around with all of that.
I want to hear it because this is the part where I don't get it. He's literally saying he can see everything within Kylo's mind. He knows
exactly.
He knows Kylo's intentions as Kylo is outsmarting him. So I'm just wondering.
And so the reason it happened was because he was distracted, right?
Right.
But it's just like, it seems to me like you would be so powerful with the Force that you would know.
Especially when, Kylo has always been submissive to Snoke. It's like you just have to assume that Snoke has the upper hand at all times.
Right.
Because Kylo is always seeking his approval. So that kind of falls in line with Snoke being...
Yeah, and I'm sure he would be suspecting, too, for the simple fact that he's literally just told Kylo Ren that he's nothing more than a pawn and that he wants to do his bidding. Maybe he might be a little upset.
I don't know.
The theory that someone has floated around, which I do think is very interesting. Apparently, in this film, they pulled something from Legends, which was the Dreadnought, and in the same comic, their Sheev Palpatine resurrects himself by, instead of doing Force Ghost, his soul or energy is then transferred into another body, and that body almost immediately begins to decay, and that body gets killed and it leaves and goes into another body. So, I mean, I think the question, I'm not saying that he's Palpatine. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that maybe Snoke has the ability to take multiple forms.
Okay.
Could be. That's just a theory. And that he might not necessarily be dead. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
Interesting.
The theory is just that the theory with him being killed in such a nonchalant sort of way is that it might not have been a big deal that he's dead anyways.
Yeah, it might not be the end, essentially.
Exactly. But the movie didn't do service to refuting those criticisms that were possibly going to come.
I need to see how it was laid out again, because depending on how it was filmed, like maybe is there anyone out there arguing that maybe Rey somehow was helping him, like a 2-against-1 situation with the Force? Like maybe there's some level of the Force that we don't understand yet. Maybe she was doing something, whether it be, these are not the droids you're looking for. Maybe in some way she is blocking his mind while Kylo is doing this.
Right.
Like,
yeah, we're still
depending on how it was filmed.
We're still. I mean, I would like to go into a little bit of a section too when we get into some of our where do we go from here discussion. But one thing that's still not fully explored is just how powerful Rey is. This is hilarious because I was literally watching Chris Stuckman's spoiler review, and in the middle of him talking, I told Kayla it's a lot like Dragon Ball Z, and as soon as I said that, he said it on the video, which was hilarious. But I've always subscribed. I hate this thought that how is Rey just powerful with the Force? Hey, guess what? Maybe you're so fucking powerful with the Force that you can just learn how to use a lightsaber and beat somebody.
The Force latched onto her.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the whole point.
Exactly. And I think the notion that she is this powerful wasn't really explored that much. In fact, Luke addressed it at one point when she was breaking rocks and how much it scared him. But they never really explored that any further, which is something I'm very fascinated to see.
You know what doesn't matter?
What?
Who Rey's parents were.
Yeah. There's some people that are subscribing to that could be a misdirect, but that would, the only reason that would frustrate me is because I don't think you have to have so many open mysteries in this universe.
I mean, no, I genuinely thought it was possible that Iden Versio and Del Mico were her parents.
Right.
I thought that was their way of telling us that. But at the same time, I'm not freaking out that they aren't.
Right.
Because it also, what they did falls in line with something that we should have been expecting, was that it doesn't have to matter.
For sure. So. Let's wrap this up. Let's give our final thoughts and give a grade, and then we'll get into some fun hooey-fooey talk.
This is, I know for a fact, this is in my top 3 favorite Star Wars movies.
Same.
Overall, I have so many positive thoughts. I know that I love the film. Some points are stronger than others, but I loved all of these characters. I thought they were. I loved revisiting them again. And I thought all of them sort of had expansions on their story. I loved most of the new characters. It felt fun to be there. Felt fresh to be there. I'm gonna give it, as it sits right now, and again, I'm still unpacking a lot, and I need to see it again. As it sits right now, I'm good with like an A-.
That's good. Yeah.
A-.
Yeah, I think the biggest plus for me in this film, I think visually, it's the most interesting looking. I mean, this film had some of my most favorite looking Star Wars scenes that I've ever seen. I do love the risks that were taken in this film. And I think the best thing for me about this movie is the fact that in a Star Wars movie, single-handedly, it has just unlocked a bunch of level. It's like finding a code in a game that you're only halfway done with that unlocks the rest of the map. Because
it's like being a code breaker.
Now we can explore so much stuff from here on out. With The Force Awakens, we couldn't go much further without getting into, because we knew that the movie was going to take place, a day later? It's just like you can't go much further than The Force Awakens. Now, it seems like there's probably going to be a time jump, and I just feel like the movie unlocked a lot with the mythology. Negatives with the movie, at the end of the day, I can wrap most of my negatives up in the fact that I think the movie was relatively disjointed. I think it hopped around more so than I like. It reminded me actually more of like a prequel era, how much they jumped around from time to time and how quick certain things were. But I think at the end of the day, it's a really good Star Wars movie. I'm going to give it a B+. It sits at number 3 on my list, right above A New Hope and below The Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, this, and A New Hope are your top 3 favorites?
No, favorite is Empire. 2 is Force Awakens. 3 is this one.
Okay. I like it. I don't know what's going on out there.
I don't know. Somebody's whistling in the background, but it's all good.
Somebody. It has to be one person.
It could be Dolly. Let's talk about... I want to talk about a couple of things that weren't in the film that surprised me. We talked about there being no resolution on the ship between Kylo and Rey, and I think that's fascinating to think about. Oh, look, there's a dog in here. It's Kylo Ren. Oh, there's 2 dogs in here. There we go. All right, we're just gonna let this happen. So
yeah, that's fine.
The other thing that wasn't in this film was an exploration of the Knights of Ren, which, listen, if I'm going to be critical about people latching too much on to Snoke and latching too much on to who are Rey's parents, I might be a little bit guilty of being like, I want to see the Knights of Ren.
It's because they're cool.
It is.
The idea of it is cool.
Well, we got a little bit more further into that because there was that note that was sort of left from Luke where he said that Kylo didn't necessarily kill all of the Jedi in his academy, that he took some of them with him.
Right.
Are you thinking that those are
definitely
part of the Knights of Ren?
I told you at IHOP. Yeah, no, definitely. Again, another movie where they're referenced. So I don't know if that's just going to end up being, I mean, that's an interesting, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but the whole point is to kind of talk about what's next. I mean, if Rey is going to start her own little academy,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's called the Jedi Order or not, if Jay,
How you doing?
if Rey is starting her own school of Jedi, for lack of a better word, they could go up against the Knights of Ren, and we could have an Attack of the Clones ending.
Well, I think it's fascinating to think about this, the fact that if I'm not sold on Kylo as a leader of this group. I think one, just from a logistical standpoint, in the sense where he's too unhinged to lead these people, but
he's like a substitute teacher.
But the thought of Kylo,
you can't take him
the thought of Kylo Ren leading the First Order, literally based out of power and fear, that I am so powerful that if you try to stand up to me, I will fucking kill you, is fascinating. But then you take it into account, okay, we know that he's not really a match for Rey. So I'm thinking, if there is a time jump, and we'll get into the time jump in a second, if he were to go up against Rey, they'd at best probably be a stalemate, that he is going to have to rule, quote unquote, rule the galaxy out of fear with the Knights of Ren at his side, walking around absolutely wrecking shop.
Right.
That's fucking cool.
It is cool.
It's cool to think about.
I mean, it's kind of like his own Jedi Order, because before with the Sith, you could only have two Sith, but it's like the anti
Snow.
The anti Kevin Marks.
Yeah.
So that's really great. Someone just spoiled R.I.P. Admiral Akbar at our YouTube channel. Anyway, where was I going with it?
I don't know.
Oh, the time jump. Let's talk about the time jump.
Yeah, I think the reason why there has to be a time jump is because this movie literally planted the seeds. Essentially, there can be no prequels. I mean, you could talk about what happened in that 30-year time span between this and Return of the Jedi.
Right.
But this was the prequel, right? I mean,
yeah.
If Star Wars Rebels sort of establishes the Rebel Order and all that stuff, this is that. And I don't think you can really do a movie well enough justice to just be like, okay, so they just started it, and now the next movie is them just building all this stuff.
And I think the time jump would make all the sense of the world when it comes. We have overthought how they are going to handle Carrie Fisher in the next movie. Time jump. Doesn't have to be a recast. Doesn't have to be a recast.
Happens in the crawl.
And it would also be unique because she could sort of live as a monument. It would make more sense in the way that people, I think, maybe thought Han was going to be a monument in this movie. And yeah, he is to a degree, but not to the degree that I thought. Leia will be more of a monument. And because just based on who her character is, the fact that we know so much more about the character of Leia than we do Han Solo, it makes a whole lot more sense if she plays the monument role for the entire, not just but the entire franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be the bookend of 9 movies. It makes a lot of sense if she is the monument at the end of all that.
Well, I think there's a clever way to do it too. I mean, if she passes away in the films, I mean, she goes on maybe not to necessarily be a visual Force ghost, but if she's more of like an auditory Force ghost, and they can use some sound clips to help, whatever.
I don't know if that falls in line with what they declared they weren't going to do.
Right.
But
well, I mean, I think at first they were talking about using unused footage, but regardless, I think I just think the time jump is fascinating to know that we could end up in the midst of something like we were in for A New Hope, where things were the Rebel Alliance was established.
Yeah.
The Empire was established, and they're literally going to war. is fascinating to see the fact that, I mean, it's super exciting to think that the next movie could begin with another space battle of Poe flying down on a planet, providing cover fire for Rey as she's going in to siege some sort of first order like stronghold.
That's the mystery of Rey's that I'm still concerned about more than I am her parents.
How is she going to interact with Poe?
No, how is she a pilot?
Has Poe and Rey ever actually interacted with one another?
How is she a pilot? I think that's the
we saw it with her flying the Millennium Falcon.
No, I'm saying how she became a pilot.
Oh yeah,
she was
apparently if you're strong with the Force, you can just pilot things. Because even Obi-Wan Kenobi didn't like to fly, but he did a pretty good job at doing it in the prequels.
Well,
Anakin.
It's more of the fact. It was more of the fact that she was raised as a junker under the rule of Unkar plot,
never having flown anything.
Who taught her to fly?
The Force. It's your easy out. You know? Hermione was a stronger wizard than Harry Potter, but he could go toe to toe with Voldemort.
It's not really the same.
It is the same.
No, it isn't.
Star Wars is the new Harry Potter. They could take some lessons. No,
it wishes.
No, I think it's exciting. I'm excited to see where Poe goes from here as well. There's so much. I think more than anything, I am excited to see what happened, but in the 30 years between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, I don't
play Battlefront 2.
I don't like living. Yeah, but there's more than that too. I mean, there's so much to be explored there.
I know.
It's exciting. I also want to see. We talked about this off air, but I also want to see a Star Wars. I want to talk about Rian Johnson going forward from here. I told you off air that I would much rather see a J.J. Abrams directed Star Wars film that was written by Rian Johnson. However, I would love to see Rian Johnson utilized in the things that he does best, character-driven, smaller stories. I think, this movie was fantastic. It was a good movie. It's a really, really good movie. Was it a perfect movie? No, it wasn't. Neither was A Force Awakens. But it was down enough for me where I would rather see Rian Johnson play more in his comfort zone. I would want him to succeed with everything he can.
I think people are pointing things out like Phasma and Snoke, saying those were JJ's creations that maybe Rian didn't need. So maybe that's why he got rid of them, things like that. So Rian,
I don't know about JJ's creations. I mean, that was probably just as much a story group,
JJ came up with that stuff.
Oh, okay.
So, but story group doesn't come up with anything. They're just like
they're
like
checking.
They're fact checkers,
right?
Yeah. So, I mean, unless someone's in the way that the visual effects guy came up with Rogue One, obviously someone could pitch something, but I think I like you said, Ryan getting to play in his own sandbox and not having to worry about taking someone else's material and things like that. So that's going to be interesting. So a lot of people, there are people that are calling those things out about Ryan, saying that maybe he would have not liked some of that stuff.
I would also love to see a Star Wars film that's less of an ensemble. I think that would play into Rian Johnson's his prose a lot better. One that's, again, more centric around one character.
The Lost Stars novels, a love story between two people.
Star Killer.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny because that's where my mind went immediately.
What if it was an adaptation?
Isn't that it? Well, they'd have to change his name.
Well, what if it was? I mean, this is such wild speculation, but what if they said, we don't want to go back to Vader. We don't want to make him Vader's apprentice. Let's take the concept of Star Killer and put him forward this time.
What if you combined Star Killer? Wait a minute. What if you took what you know about Star Killer, but made it sort of about the Knights of the Old Republic, but made it sort of about like the first person who found the Force? Like it would almost sort of be like in the way that Apocalypse, it was the first mutant,
right?
Like that, but in Star Wars, and you made it a Star Killer-esque type thing. But then I guess he would become the mentor and not the protege. But
I would like to see somebody that was from Luke's academy that was taken by Kylo Ren out of fear of his own life, learned his ways, but then had a change of heart and escaped, and just was this rogue force user just living out amongst the people, and he finds himself in an environment where he's the only force user, and he's faced with a task of his morality, and he's challenged.
I was gonna say I could see someone using the force willy nilly and not belonging to any kind of sector
no
or
lightsaber
group or whatever.
Yeah, free of a lightsaber, just shooting some lightning bolts or pushing
Yeah.
some things around.
And he creates a lot of enemies because of it.
Absolutely.
That'd be interesting. Be like a chronicle
Yeah.
in the Star Wars universe.
Is this something I think about while I walk my dog to take so that he takes shits? I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm also saying that that's the case. I'll sell you my screenplay.
We've pretty much discussed the movie as much as we can. Quick take, and we'll head out of here. Laura Dern's Holdo
Whatever.
led to a really cool moment when she blasted through.
Yeah, it could have been anybody. Speaking of, General Hux in this film, I'm so over him.
General!
I'm so over. I thought, we're talking about overacting. That's another one. 2 steps away from a Jesse Eisenberg. It's the name of my new book about how to act.
I have said Dolly with my
I know you did.
snow compression.
Let's get out of here. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell. We referenced our previous movie episode where Ace and myself talk about Alita, Battle Angel, and Ready Player One, and a whole bunch of other things. It was such a great, healthy podcast. Definitely go and check that out. You can find that on our podcast feed, or you can find it on our YouTube channel, which there's a lot of new recent videos up on our YouTube channel. You just put up the top 5 reasons why people hate The Last Jedi. I did like a brief ride-along reaction.
Where all these comments come from on the video?
It's a video that just
incites people to get angry.
Begs for comments. Yeah, it's a great YouTube video. So
you haven't even watched it.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Jaye Williams, J to the A to the Y to the E. It's the same for both. He mentioned my Star Wars video. Yeah, you can check that out. But you can also check out my top 10 singles of the year video that I just dropped. Got my album of the year videos coming out, which I was supposed to record today, and I didn't. And I absolutely have no idea when I'm going to be able to do that. So they're coming next week before Sunday. No, they have to come before Saturday because I'm leaving on Saturday. So look for those. You'll have some music to listen to. Had some guy comment and say, did you see that comment where he was like, I understand what you guys are doing, but I think you're spreading yourself too thin. I come here to listen to one genre of music, and I don't care about most of these other genres. And I was just like, I get that.
I think what I like about his comment is I think if maybe we sat down and talked about how we tackled particular genres, like if you want to, I don't mean to put this on you, it could be either one of us, but if one of us did top 10 hardcore albums of 2017, maybe did something like that to kind of help.
Well, I mean, I challenged him. I said, I understand what you're saying. I think I would challenge you to broaden your horizons. Would be my thing. But I also said I'm completely aware of the challenge that exists of appealing to a wide variety of people, which is why on my music show I speak so broadly and generally about music,
right?
That anybody can enjoy.
I think he's right that we are spread too thin. We'd obviously love
genre wise.
No, I think he's talking about the amount that we're able to tackle.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe.
Obviously, if we had all the time in the world,
right,
then we could probably fix some of his issues.
Yeah, but, I mean, that guy just needs to get with the program. Ultimately, music wise and genre wise, it's probably been more catered towards rock music than it's been anything else, at least specifically for my reviews.
Did you see where someone commented on one of your videos last night? And I only read
did.
I read one sentence.
I didn't care that you commented on the video at all.
Well, I didn't either until I realized I think he changed it. I read like one or two sentences and then responded, and then for whatever reason, when I went back, it was a full paragraph that I missed for some reason. So then I was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't comment.
I didn't care that you commented for it at all. I don't even really remember what it was about, but oh yeah, they were just being defensive about the singer of the neighborhood. Yeah. Anyways, we'll see you guys later. You gonna say bye?
Dolly's licking my jeans.
All right, goodbye.